Welcome to I Have a Question number 4, being streamed live on April 27th and 28th, 2014 on the EdTechTalk channel of the World Bridges Network. I am Jeff Lebo in Busan, Korea, joined by
Dave Cormier, Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island.
And Paul Allison in New York City.
And
we have two friends who are nearby, and I'm sure will show up again soon. So, Jeff, I think we have a question for tonight. Would you like to run that out for us?
We do. We have a featured question, and we've also got a little bit of follow-up on last week's question about curating and fostering conversations, and a few tidbits of questions coming up. But our featured question came from Paul Allison, so why don't we let him ask it?
I'd have to remember it to do it. No, yeah, it's not right in front of me. But here's some of the issue. Should we wait till John gets here?
No, you go ahead.
We should jump in. Yeah. Okay. So I guess my simplest way of asking the question is, what about MOOCs for K-12, or at least secondary school, high school? And is anybody doing that already? What do they look like? Is it a bad idea or a terrible idea, as John said last week? But it just seemed to me that, I always sort of like to, whatever we're doing with professional development, see how that works with my students too, and vice versa. So that's kind of the impetus of the notion. I have other ideas about it, but that have developed since, of course, but that's where it started.
Yeah.
Do you want me to say more? Or go ahead.
No, that's
Please
okay.
interrupt me.
I'll jump in. The K-12 thing is interesting because predominantly when we look at MOOCs and we look at the research that's been done on them, it's been predominantly professionals who actually engage in them. So it's people who are often post-first degrees, sometimes several degrees, and the majority of the research we've seen have suggested that it's people who are already engaged in something who are then taking the something. In the places where we don't find people who are necessarily degree-bound, we find them intensely interest-bound. So the example I always like to use is the equine nutrition course at the University of Edinburgh, where while a lot of those people didn't necessarily have degrees in equine nutrition, they had equines in their backyard who they were looking to nutritionize. So they had a deep interest in the subject matter. As many of us have noted on many occasions, it is not true that every high school student, for instance, is deeply interested in the subjects that they're doing, nor is that true across all of K-12. It certainly does happen, but for good or for ill, people do not self-select their way into the K-12 educational system, so, nor do they separate off by interest. So really, when you look at K-12, I always think of it as the most difficult target market in the world, because you have essentially a random collection of people thrown into a room together. And as you go across the entire system, you have a random collection of random people who aren't even separated by geography. So when you add the MOOC to the equation, it just gets that much more complex. I remember a wonderful discussion 7 or 8 years ago, 10 years ago on EdTechTalk between Lee Baber and the kids from New York City. And I just imagine those kids from Virginia, I think it was Virginia, who were talking about Halloween. And one group of kids from the big city were saying, oh yeah, we're going to go out on Halloween, we're going to do all this crazy stuff. And the kids from Virginia were saying, I'm going to go over to my grandma's house, and we're going to have dinner, and then we will get candy. And we had two groups of kids who were the same age, from the same country, potentially same socioeconomic background, I don't know for sure, but certainly different by culture, in the sense of which they looked at the way, at their age, the way that they looked at the world was profoundly different. And when I look at the idea of a MOOC and trying to go across all of that, whew, that's a pretty tall order. Pretty tall order.
But isn't there a lot of diversity in a MOOC group, or not? Am I wrong to assume that?
Well, I mean, certainly there are only so many passionate poets who hate math who take the math MOOCs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are only so many people who hate horses who take equine nutrition courses. And it's that self-selecting nature that makes MOOCs work in the way that they do. When you look at RISO 14, I had crazy educators who participated in that, who were passionate about the idea of education. If I'd had several doctors and lawyers in there, and you know, a couple of pipe fitters and some fishermen, they probably wouldn't have been as invested, and then the whole approach probably wouldn't work quite the way that it did. And that's the problem with K-12, right? Because people aren't self-selecting. So to me, one of the key factors to having a MOOC is the self-selecting process.
Just a quick hello to John and Jen who've joined us.
Hey, Dave.
Hey, was John having issues as well? Sorry,
Yeah,
folks.
I had to reboot too.
Me too.
Yeah.
Hey.
So, Dave, do you think content plays a role as well? I mean, one of the struggles that we have in K-12 is that rather than allowing people, I think, at least, rather than allowing people to investigate a topic in a broad sense, that we seem to be saddled with having very specific content objectives, very specific outcomes that we want. So I think there would be a concern in a MOOC that everything gets covered by everybody. Again, as you're talking more about what the motivations are for the people in the course, and I think MOOCs are very well suited to people who are self-motivated to learn, but in terms of a student who has to achieve a certain number of objectives in order to move forward, I'm not sure exactly how that would work.
I mean, it certainly could work if you look at the XMOOC model. So if you look at the work that's been done by edX and the stuff that we were working on a couple months ago, where what the idea is to take the curriculum from a grade 12 physics class and break it into essentially, it stops becoming a MOOC at that point to some degree. It breaks it into an open platform that allows you to use a lot more sophisticated technology to track people's progress. And it takes essentially an instructivist approach to teaching these people how to do that, maybe with a little bit of curveball thrown in there. But the advantage starts to become administrative rather than educational. So if you can create these resources and replace a textbook, a paper textbook, with something that you can flip into a classroom, into 1,000 classrooms from one centralized location, from an administrative standpoint, knowing what's working, what's not working, what the percentages are, whether a video is being watched, there's some really interesting analytics pieces you can do there that certainly provide some pretty wonderful things. And from an administrative standpoint, from a teacher's perspective, there are a lot of really, really bad physics textbooks out there, and one of the problems with OER, with open educational resources, is that they're bloody hard to find, and having somebody collect them for you and having them vetted on a continuous basis certainly does provide some advantages to the average physics teacher. Because OER are great as long as you can find them and you know what to do with them. Whereas if they're being curated by some central organization so they can run a physics MOOC, then I think you've got some advantages there.
Does it matter if it's a MOOC or not a MOOC? Can you sort of integrate some MOOC components if, the process is orienting and declaring and networking and all of that? Can't that happen if we say, all right, 10th graders around the world are studying this particular topic, and there's a place for them to share common resources and to connect with each other and to go at their own path and to work together to find areas of particular interest? I don't know if that qualifies as a MOOC, but it's MOOC-ish.
I struggle with that too, and I don't necessarily want this to turn into 4 people asking questions and Dave having to answer everything. so it's kind of fun.
I hate that.
But yeah, what's the difference if we're going down that XMOOC road? Then what's the difference between that and just having the online courses that we've had for 10 years?
The same difference that the word means all the time. It's massive and it's open. So the difference 1 is that lots and lots and lots of people are doing it together. Difference 2 is that the resources are open and can be reused and aren't being going into some Pearson coffers and are actually being evaluated ostensibly based on the fact that they work rather than based on the fact that they sell. And I to go to the Sugach or Mitra comment we're going to deal with later, I see that as a fundamental difference. Judging something based on whether it works is very, very different than judging it based on whether it sells. And our current publishing model for the materials that go into the classroom are almost entirely based on whether or not they sell.
And just making sure, are you guys following along in the chat room? There's some awesome commentary happening over there, by the way. Kathy's had some good questions about could we talk about a model in which the MOOC is used in high school as an elective, as like an independent study, getting away from some of the formal objectives or whatever you may have that I kind of came in on when I got logged back in. And then Benjamin was mentioning too some of the points I think John was making, the problem maybe calling it, and maybe even more what Jeff was saying, calling it a MOOC. And I think that's what I kind of struggle with some of the commentary when we start talking about MOOC as though that is online education. So there's all kinds of other online activities and online
No, there isn't.
things you can do. Yes, there is. Yes, there is. And so I think that's, we try to put everything into a MOOC box when some of the suggestions that were coming through were almost like just bringing classrooms together that people like Kathy and others that are on here have been doing for a long time.
And Ben mentioned Khan Academy, which, I consider, and again, this word, I always get hung up on the word MOOC, but it has a lot of the ingredients of a MOOC. I'm wondering what wise old Paul has to say about all this.
So, wise old Paul, yeah, thanks.
Just call Paul.
Well, and on Youth Voices, we've been so one of the things that we try to do sometimes is connect and have our students connect, and but it doesn't happen a lot. So, but Youth Voices is centered around individual inquiry, and if you, I also wanted to hear Monica Hardy in this, and so what if you did challenge some of those content expectations and did allow students to have a lot of independence in choosing topics and developing their own inquiries and paths? Would a MOOC help to do that? In other words, so I'm actually looking for a MOOC to undermine some of those problems that you're seeing in K-12 education.
Yeah, and it goes to Kathy Shields'. Goes to Kathy Shields' comments about the Genius Hour type class, right? So if you use it as a way out and a way to connect people to the couple of other people who are like them in other locations, from that perspective, I think it's awesome. It'd be really, really fun to do. I wonder, it would totally work for that, as long as you hit. The problem is that you need the teachers to connect it. You know better than anybody, Paul, how much work it is to make all those connections. Like, it's not hard to start them. Maintaining them is the problem. The whole reason why I was interested in MOOCs in the first place is that as much as I love EdTechTalk and I love this kind of conversation, it was really, really hard to continue any of the community projects we were doing. Youth Voices is almost a proof of that in its exceptionalism, in the ways in which it's been able to maintain itself. But so many projects started and ended. Whereas the beautiful thing about a MOOC, from my perspective, and the thing that makes it different from something like EdTechTalk or something like Youth Voices, is that it starts and ends. So when a teacher says, I'm going to be part of that, I'm going to support my students in this as this Genius Hour, whatever, and we're going to take 100 schools, whatever, the beauty of it is that it finishes. So you know what your commitment is, and then you can finish it successfully, right? So the problem with committing to community is that even unintentionally, you change jobs, that you don't have the right students, it doesn't really fit. It's, you're going to end up slowly.
Or as simple as we have different holidays. But yeah, go ahead.
It tails off, or it just kind of sort of fades away. And I think there's something deeply damaging about people constantly striving to change education and try to be part of the change of education, and always coming up empty somehow, which is why I like the MOOC approach, because you can drive towards it and then run it hard for 6 weeks or 10 weeks or whatever it is, and then say, you know what, we're going to come back to this later and we're going to do that again and commit to it for a short period of time. And I think that it provides the structure that allows us to integrate it into the complex society that we have, which is, like I say, that's why when people start saying massive open online communities, and I think MOOC is a bad word, the reason why after 6 years I'm still pig-headed about this is that it's been my experience that all of these projects are hard to run. A MOOC is hard to run. EdTechTalk is hard to, like, it's hard to do this stuff all the time over time. And Paul, you're the market exception to a lot of this. But you know as well as I do how many people fall away as you go through this process. Whereas if you can say to somebody, 10 weeks, let's go at it, and then it'll be done, it's an easier commitment to people to make. And I think it's easier for the students to understand as well.
Hey, Paul, and I apologize if you started out with this and I just missed it, but this was your question that we carried over from last week's conversation. So when you asked the question originally, when you were thinking about a MOOC or what you were trying to accomplish, what were your goals of setting one up or asking the question in general?
It was an idea in search of a goal, but I can say that, you know, one of the interesting things that happens on Youth Voices is that teachers see other students' work and say, oh, that's a cool way to write a poem. I want to do that assignment too, right? So and then we do have a collection of what we call missions, which becomes, you know, again, a long list that's hard to find. And the CL MOOC stuff that the Writing Project has been doing last summer, and they're going to be doing it again this summer, has a collection of makes. So I started to wonder, like, I mean, oddly, it would create more structure to the Youth Voices community than exists now, it seemed to me. And I'm not sure we wanted that, but kids miss each other a lot, right? So, as it is now. So they're doing assignments in their own classrooms. Every once in a while we get together, but then they go read Hamlet, and, oh, I read Hamlet 3 months ago. You know, it would have been great if we were reading that together. So so part of it is to try to think about organizing that community of teachers. So did that make some sense?
Yeah, and I'm just kind of chatting along with Kathy. What do MOOCs accomplish? And I think it's kind of like it's in the eye of the beholder in some regard. And so you've said a whole bunch of cool things to accomplish, and it's a matter of then how you structure the MOOC or the online experience. And John raised a good question. What if you set up a MOOC and only 10 people show up? Then is it suddenly not a MOOC? And then it's like, what is it? I don't know. It doesn't get the category of
yeah, I was going to ask Dave that. What does massive mean? You know, Terry Elliott answered me one time when I asked that massive means massively open. But
yeah, that comes from the Brian Alexander school of MOOC. I don't see it that way. I think that qualifying the word open with massively is not hugely helpful. Open is open. It's either is or it's just one of those things that's really often very easy to identify. Mm-hmm. The massive for me has to do with the quantity of connection. So you could have, in my view, you could have 1,000 people involved in it, have them not connecting, and I wouldn't think of it as particularly massive. It's the quantity of connection that provides the thing that's different. So it's not the number. If there's a number of people, like if you have 1,000 people standing in a room, they're not doing anything. The fact that there's 1,000, other than the heat produced, is not particularly relevant. Mm-hmm. But I see a MOOC, just to finish that thought, a MOOC is something that happens after the fact. I don't think you can start a MOOC. I think you can have one.
I don't know about that. I mean, I think behind every good MOOC is someone banging their head against the monitor, or someone, you know, there's either an agenda and or a passion of getting something going. Behind Coursera MOOCs, there's business interest or academic interest. Behind Riso 14, there's a guy who is out there with a great passion for Riso, and I know the community brings a lot to it, but still that would not have happened without you setting up some kind of framework.
I'm not saying it happens just by accident. I'm just saying that I can't tell you ahead of time whether or not enough connection is going to happen for it to have the advantages of a MOOC.
But I think in contemplating a K-12 MOOC, it matters a lot who's behind it. Is it a Paul Allison with a great passion to encourage writing around the world? Is it a school superintendent who wants to push something? Is it, you know, what are the, not hidden agendas, but who...
You need the scale. Like if somebody has no way of getting a hold of anybody, you're not going to get a MOOC started. You know, the reason why I was talking to the guys at Harvard, one of the ones they started last summer, the one that Cogdog did the consultation on, and they're like, yeah, well, we'll just start a MOOC, and people came. I'm like, yes, that's because you're Harvard. You guys can do whatever you want.
Right. If I started a MOOC, I'd get 4 people to show up, and maybe that's still massive. The way I look at the massive piece of that acronym is that it's unbounded, right? Everyone's invited. We're not setting, we're only going to take 25 people, or we're only going to take 2,500 people, or whatever we're set up to scale. We're just going to let it go, and whoever wants to come can come. But yeah, if I were to start one, I don't think that I would be able to get enough of a critical mass there for anything interesting to happen.
I mean, I think we all have the ability. If you put something out there interesting, you're certainly connected enough that people would, if there's interest, if it finds its audience, who knows where it could go.
Yeah.
I mean, no one is without the ability to connect these days.
Are we speechless?
Sure.
I don't know if that's happened before.
Okay.
No, I mean, I think some people have a better chance than others. If Bob Dylan decided he was going to run a Bob Dylan MOOC tomorrow, he'd get 50,000 people. Frankly, I had no idea. I was hoping to get to 100. I got somewhere near 5, and frankly was a little surprised to get that far. When George and Stephen did the first one, they were doing 30 keynotes a year. That makes a huge difference.
Yeah, and I think, to me, the M is part of the acronym, but it's the openness. I think that's the part that makes things potentially really cool. It's like Paul was saying, my school can connect with your school, can connect with the other school, and if we get 200, if we get 20, that's okay. But it's just breaking down those walls, those walled gardens that we tend to have around traditional online, and I'm using my air quotes, online education, which historically has been you only participate with the people that are enrolled in some formal program.
Absolutely.
And so to me, the exciting part that we've been talking about for years and years here, starting back when I first made my call when we were working on, what was that, the CMS Academy, I guess, or the Webcast Academy or whatever. It's the idea that somebody out there is interested in something you're interested in, and by using the technology and the means of communicating, that we can find each other and talk about it and work on beer casts or whatever it may be that we're working on. So, we tend to get so hung up on the M, and I think it's really the openness that's...
Well, with hopes of successfully completing this show, I'm thinking perhaps we should head into wrap-up mode because we're almost at a half an hour. I'm wondering if we want any closing thoughts on this, any follow-up thoughts on last week's question, and a preview of next week's question.
Wow, we have a next week's question already?
Well, we will in about 3 minutes.
Okay, got it.
I have a quick complication that I'll add, and that is that one of the things that Monica and others have pushed back on this idea of a youth MOOC is that doing it across generations is actually might be more interesting. I think that then complicates it, but I think it's an interesting idea. So that you want a MOOC where youth voice, student voice is the strongest voice, I think, but having adults in there working together feels like a good thing to me too. So I just thought adding that into the question is where we are at this point.
Wow, I think finding the topic that would be engaging for the multi-generational audience would be the challenge. That if you got something that people were really interested in and could... What?
Bieber.
No, it's the Canadian talking again. If we could find, if there were a topic that people could be excited about working with a multi-age cohort on, I think that it has a lot of really interesting possibilities. Go on, Dave.
What was Bieber?
It's a
Bieber have a
suggestion
MOOC?
for a topic.
Oh,
Beaver
the
MOOC.
Beaver MOOC. Awesome.
You know, I heard
Yeah.
Beaver's starting a Bob Dylan MOOC.
Hey now.
You know.
I mean,
maybe
I
Dylan's
think that
starting
from
a
a Genius
Beaver
Hour
MOOC.
perspective, I think there's real possibility there. I think there's lots and lots of things that certain kids and certain schools are really interested in. I think that, to Jen's point, yes, open education is certainly what I care about as well, but it's not the same as massive open education. Those two things are different. I think the open education is much more interesting, but I think that the massive part is also profoundly different, particularly from a data perspective, from the ways in which that it provides scope and scale. And scope and scale are different, not necessarily better, but different.
All right.
Very
I'm
helpful,
loving,
guys. Thanks.
I'm loving the chat room saying that 30 minutes isn't enough. I think that cracks me up.
30 minutes is plenty, chat room.
I think that was a reminder that you have hit
just
30
listen.
minutes.
I think so.
Hint, hint.
Hint, hint,
We are
hint.
going to continue this on TTT on Wednesday, and maybe the next 2 Wednesdays. So we're going to keep talking about MOOCs. On TTT.
I'll do my best, Paul.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
And I did invite Benjamin into the Hangout, but he hasn't shown up yet. He posted, and I'm putting this in the chat room, a follow-up thought to our how are we going to curate and foster this conversation, and he created a Google spreadsheet as a possibility. John Schinker also dug up a
Wiki from the past?
wiki from the past. There's an EdTech
2010.
wiki.
When
And
we were organized and everything, huh?
I played around with a couple options but balked, so that stuff is still percolating. If anyone has any other thoughts on how to make the magic happen in archiving all this, let us know. All right, what's our question next week?
I heard Jeff was going to tell us.
Well, we have a few listed on the Google event listing. I'm thinking
Can we
this.
talk about neoliberalism? Because that'd be awesome.
Let's see.
Yeah.
Where's our event page? Read them off,
Can we
Jeffy.
fight about Sugatra Mitra and neoliberalism? Because that'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, why does Mitra anger so many in education? And the link is here. And there's actually been a bunch of links about this. He's been pissing people off in recent weeks and beyond. So, do you want to preview that, Dave? What's that about? Why is he pissing people off?
Because he thinks of education as a really simplistic process. He doesn't see it as complex at all, and he sees knowledge as divorced from people. So he thinks that it's no problem replacing teachers with computers, because all we need to do is get the knowledge to the kids, and then they'll be fine.
Based on the... We don't want to go into it now. Never mind.
Okay. I think we've got a topic.
All right.
That sounds like a topic. And you're suggesting we start out by reading that link, right?
Yep,
Yes.
it's a good one. I have a potential wonderful guest for that one too, but I'll ask her
Is it
first.
Sugra Mitra?
No, it's the person in my house. It's very strong. feelings about
Posey
these.
would be awesome.
Posey would be super. I saw her vines this week. They were
We got to get her on one of these.
She's a serious viner, that one.
All right, so I'll post something on the Google Plus event page within the next 24 hours. If anyone has thoughts or comments, please post it there, or on Facebook, or on Twitter, or anywhere else. And we will look forward to continuing the conversation next time. There's an output. I'm the guy who winds up editing this. I've never had like a tweet that's like, okay, bye. Okay, oh yeah. So I have an output on that. I wanted to successfully conclude this discussion.
Look forward to continuing the
the
conversation.
conversation.
Love that.
Next time.
Oh.
Oh, this
Thank you
is
all.
great. This
Thanks,
has been
Dad.
a great. Look at the text chat. We had to spend a time going back and reading it too. There's good
You know, I
stuff.
forgot how to do this, right? Like to have a conversation and read a text and participate in a chat at the same time. Like, I'm out of practice.
And this was a particularly chatty chat room,
Mhm.
thankfully. Oh, there's Kathy Avenel. Hi, Kathy. The two Kathys were in there.
Kathy and Kathy, the whole troop's getting back together.
Yay!
Yay.
Chicago Brewery.
What?
Bye, Paul.
Chicago Brewery.
Oh, bye,
Bye,
Paul.
Paul.
What'd you get?
Bye, Paul.
Revolution? Which one?
Nope. Haymarket.
Haymarket. I don't know Haymarket.
Haymarket?
Oh.
You should go. Yeah,
Really?
it's probably walking distance for you.
You
Went
know,
to
if
that other
anybody
one
else
and
wants to
that
be,
class broke.
I'm interrupting beer conversation.
No,
Go
sorry.
on,
Go ahead, Chad.
go
Go
on.
ahead.
It would be lovely to see more conversations on EdTechTalk or elsewhere. It's so easy now with Hangouts. No more virtual audio cables or other suffering.
Just
So-
put in a plug for.
Well, you know, I listen to a lot of podcasts now, and I kind of have nothing to listen to on EdTechTalk these days. So,
Oh, I started listening to 99% Invisible. That is awesome.
Isn't that fantastic?
Yes. That is awesome. But unfortunately, they're not on EdTechTalk, Jeff. I'm sorry.
You could probably repost them until they notice.
what is Dave doing?
Stretching my back.
You know, those are all good. That
From my back?
whole, what is the consortium that they're in?
Oh, yeah. I don't know. I know what you're talking
The
about.
Truth is really good, and I've just started. What did I just start listening to? That was also really good.
Does anybody want to help me pack?
Where are you going?
Where you going, Dave?
Texas.
What for?
I'm not sure.
You have a link?
No, it's not a public event.
Oh.
No, George Siemens sent me an email a couple of months ago and said,
We're still
You're gonna come
broadcasting
out-
just in case there was any doubt.
"You're going to come out to Texas, right?" I was like, "What are we doing, George?" He said, "We're having a design jam." So I moved some stuff around and I worked it out because working with George is always fun.
Yeah, what's a
So it
design
turned-
jam?
It turns out what he's doing is he is going to create a learning analytics course.
Oh,
And
I
he's-
did see. He tweeted that, right? This
Did he?
week? I
Is
believe
there a
he
link
did.
for that?
It might be.
I would like to find out more about it, frankly. He's brought in lots of really crazy people from all over, a group of people that have never known. I don't know. I think I know like 3 people going, and I'll be surprised if anybody else knows more than 3 people going.
Well, that's very cool of George to do
Yeah.
that.
So it's going to be interesting. I think I'm probably the token crazy person, which is fine.
Yeah, it's a role you're familiar with, I believe.
That's a rule I'm familiar with. Yeah, so it should be interesting. It's usually when I go to something, you've got like 2 days of panic, and you're thinking, oh my god, I don't have my keynote ready yet. I don't have my presentation ready, or I don't have this ready, or I don't have notes ready. And this one, I have nothing to get ready.
And
So
you're
I'm
just
kind
supposed to show up.
Well, it's weird because I'm trying to get ready. I'm like, okay, where's my passport? I'm like, oh my god, do I have my stuff ready? Like, oh wait.
Oh, passport. That's right. You need a passport to come to Texas. I forgot about that.
Yeah,
It says,
you know that I've had problems with my passports before, right?
I did not.
Yeah, twice I forgot my passport on the scanner in the house
Oh.
and couldn't find it anywhere. When I went
Dave,
to
you're
India,
being
I found
stalked
it,
by
I
a
think it was
cat.
15 minutes before I had to leave.
Yeah, that would be difficult. Here's what he put, by the way. He said, kicking off LAMP, Open Learning Analytics Master's Program
Is
at
that what it is?
CMU. I don't know. What's a CMU?
I don't
There's
know.
no linkies.
CMU.
Carnegie
That's,
Mellon University.
Methodist University or something.
Oh.
Oh, Carnegie Mellon?
Carnegie Mellon? That's in Pittsburgh, though.
Let's just guess.
Pittsburgh, Texas.
I just put it
Canadian
in.
Mennonite?
Canadian Mennonite. I bet that's it. How about Lisa? Is Lisa part of your group?
Lisa,
Hammersham.
I don't know.
She just commented on it. Who's Jay Stamper? We're like lurking. We're lurking in George's Twitter feed, and I don't know who these people are. Well, I guess that's not what you're doing, Dave. Anyway.
I know who
Pittsburgh,
Dragon is.
Texas.
Could it be Columbia University? Could it be? But CMU.
Yeah, I don't know. John's involved in so many things; it's hard to know. So yeah, I'm just going out there to see what's going on and to sort of rant and rave, I guess. Particularly as I did the work with edX, because this is going to be an edX thing. And I now have very strong feelings about edX.
How would you characterize those feelings?
Yeah. You know, you ever meet like somebody and you get into a conversation with them and you think there's a you're like you have the potential to be like the coolest person and yet somehow I don't want to talk to you.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I feel about edX.
Okay.
There's a lot of potential there, particularly given the access to technology that they have. So if you imagine something like Moodle, and you imagine MIT designing for it. So if you want Moodle to stand up and walk out and make you coffee, they can do that, right? The potential is there. And there are a lot of things that, from a technological perspective, when we look at online learning, it'd be really nice to do. And there's some really cool things that edX sometimes does. But then I asked somebody for something to go, oh, we'll give you a CSV export. And I went, no, I just want to see who has posted a blog post today. No, we'll give you a CSV export. Like, but I don't want a CSV export. I just want to see them like in a group.
So do you think it is intent? Like, I mean, you have a different, when you envision whatever it is you're envisioning about this topic, they just have a different vision of where this is going to go, or?
The guy I worked with was the guy who designed the whole system. From a profound way, we have a very different way of looking at education.
Right.
It was very much designed to remediate people through the sciences.
Right.
So, I mean, in that sense that some people see education as a constant process of remediation. So you don't know this, you should know this. You don't know that, you should know that. And that's the way they see education, that what you need to know is already known, and you don't know it yet, so we'll tell you about it, and then you'll know it.
Right. So then that inherently becomes very transactional, that they're working on improving the transaction, which would not be something that you'd necessarily be all that excited.
And yet they see themselves as constructivist.
Well,
under
everybody
the cognitive,
cool does.
Yeah, under the cognitive science model, right? So from their perspective, what they're doing is doing an exploratory approach to definitive outcomes. So if you take the example I heard 3 times while I was at edX was take the Pythagorean theorem. What we will do is walk you through the process of proving the theorem for the first time yourself. So you'll do the first step, then you'll do the second step, but you have to figure out all those pieces in the middle. So what you're doing is constructivism, because you're figuring those things out on your own, even though the outcomes are predefined and pre-structured on a single linear arc. But they very much view this as constructivism. They see themselves as going all the way back, because they have evidence from cognitive science, which speaks to cognitive overload and all the rest of this stuff, where you need to make sure that you stay under the thing with the whatever, and you need to provide this kind of thing, because they have proof that this brings you to better outcomes. But again, built inside their own concept of what learning means. So there's this whole piece, and this fundamentally underwrites the way that edX is built.
So this is where I go back to my conversation twister before, where I'm saying this is just online education. I mean, that's what we've been doing for decades.
Yeah, totally.
We're walking through. So that's where I was saying also, like, your vision of where this is and where this could be, and is so different in that I view what they're trying to do is just build a better mousetrap for online learning.
Well, they discovered online
different,
learning. They totally discovered online learning. In a sense, they did.
I thought Blackboard did.
They never looked at anybody else's work. They never bothered reading anything else other than Mickey Chi's work on cognitive science and peer learning, and our mentor peer learning, and then they just went ahead and built as if nobody had ever done this before. So in a sense, they did discover online learning, and then they did all the same things that the people who did it before me did, and learned that was a bad idea. But yeah, so it's kind of funny.
Ben has discovered several links related to your meeting that you might want to check out before you get on the plane.
Oh,
A
that's
Google
so
group
nice.
and a blog post.
Thanks.
Oh, Ben. So helpful in making Dave look so prepared.
And well, one of the topics we're going to be discussing is to detail how and where to store and host content. So you've got a head start, man. We've been talking about curating and fostering, so you're good to go.
Okay. Oh, so we think it's Carnegie Mellon. Is that what we're thinking?
It was not Canadian Mennonite.
It was not. I was
close,
so sure
though.
it was.
I think George was a Mennonite.
And they're using a Google group to facilitate the conversation. Is that true?
Huh?
I'm seeing a link to that. Is that right?
There's a blog post and a Google group.
A Google group.
A post in a Google group. Yes.
That is
There's the
so
group. I'll put this in the.
interesting.
And Ben asks you in the chat also, Dave, of the three, edX and Coursera and Udacity, do you have a preference? Which one is best?
Oh, there's no conversation. The guys at edX are far more interested in actually having people learn things. My critiques of edX are about philosophical differences. The people there are actually really interested in education. And really, I think, I went over to, particularly as you dig in deeper, so I was over at Harvard X. And those guys, I have no criticism for the people in that room, because there's some smart-ass people in there doing some crazy educational shit. And that's the beauty of the edX model, is that behind edX are MITx and Harvard X, where you have a lot of really, really great researchers who are doing some really profoundly interesting stuff. And the platform, if it ever gets there, has the capacity to do some really interesting things. And yeah, whereas the guys at Coursera, Udacity, but they're just not doing that. They're doing what Jen was saying, which is about just it's online learning. It's a mousetrap. I wouldn't even say better mousetrap. It's a mousetrap.
All right, John and I are going to go. He has beer to drink, and I have learning to facilitate.
Oh yeah, it's your day's just
I gotta
starting.
go to work.
And Dave, I
gotta go to
suggest you
work.
read. It would be good reading to read George's blog post. I'm just giving it.
George's blog post. Come on, Jen. I was just going to suggest that we all drop out of the call and see how long Dave talks by himself.
You actually did suggest that.
I think it would be a while. We could
Enjoy
just
your trip
freeze
to-
our faces, she'll think.
Yeah, right.
Enjoy your trip to our fine
Enjoy your
United
trip to
States of
Texas.
America.
He's coming
Thanks.
to Ohio the week after that, which will be awesome.
Oh, that's
I
right.
am.
I can't
It's
go
gonna
to
be fun.
that. That's super fun.
I
Jeff's
don't know.
flying in to meet us.
I don't know, George, if you are going to get the Barbara Sawhill sighting or not. But I think she's going to drive out too. I think she's coming Wednesday night. You're going to be there Thursday night. Is that right?
What?
You said George. Do you mean John?
John.
He
Sorry, I was
referred
reading
to
George's-
George as John earlier too, which
Yeah.
I'm coming Thursday morning,
Yep.
right?
Yep. I think you'll miss her.
Okay. I'm not coming Wednesday night because you said you were going to be exhausted after being up for 20 hours.
20 hours. Yes, indeed.
And then I'm leaving Friday morning when you are.
Perfect.
Awesome.
You're doing lots of breathing. I think you're breathing a lot, John. If you could stop it. All right,
Dave, we
back
can
to
talk
grading.
about beer too.
Have a lovely week, everybody.
Ta for now, everyone.
See you next time.
Good night.